Hey everyone, let's talk about posture, you know, especially with so many of us working from home these days.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to forget about good posture when you're not in a traditional office setting.
Right. Exactly. And it's amazing how something as simple as how we hold our bodies can have such a big impact on our health and well-being.
Huge impact. I've been diving into some research on this for our deep dive today.
Oh, cool. What kind of stuff have you been looking at?
Well, I've got some really interesting articles here from HubbleHQ, Distribute Consulting, the Remote First Institute, and Global Workplace Analytics.
Those are some great sources. I'm excited to hear what you've uncovered.
They cover everything from the science behind good posture to practical tips for setting up a more ergonomic workspace.
Perfect. Because I know I've definitely caught myself slouching over my laptop way too many times.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's a common problem, but the good news is that there are lots of simple things we can do to improve our posture and avoid those aches and pains.
So, where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with one of the biggest posture culprits, the dreaded forward head tilt.
You mean like when you're looking down at your phone all the time?
Exactly. HubbleHQ calls it the phone on the sofa pose. And it's a recipe for neck pain.
Oh, I'm definitely guilty of that one. So what's actually happening in our bodies when we do that?
Well, think about this. Your head weighs about 5 kilograms, like a bowling ball.
Wow, that's heavier than I thought.
Right. Now imagine tilting that bowling ball forward. All that weight puts a ton of pressure on your neck muscles.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
At a 60-degree tilt, that 5-kilogram head puts a whopping 27 kilograms of pressure on your spine.
Ouch. No wonder my neck hurts sometimes.
It's like trying to hold a bowling ball at arm's length all day long.
So that's why we get that stiff, achy feeling in our necks and shoulders, and even headaches sometimes.
Exactly. And over time, that forward head posture can lead to more serious problems, like disc degeneration and nerve compression.
Yikes. So how do we avoid turning into a human, question mark?
Well, awareness is the first step. Just being mindful of how you're holding your head can make a big difference.
Right, so like trying to keep your chin tucked in and your ears aligned with your shoulders.
Exactly. And when you're using your phone, try to hold it up at eye level instead of looking down at it.
Good tip. What about when we're working on our laptops?
Make sure the top of your screen is at eye level. You might need to use a laptop stand or some books to elevate it.
Makes sense. And headphones can be a lifesaver too.
Right. Absolutely. Especially if you're on long calls. That way you're not craning your neck to hold the phone between your ear and shoulder.
Okay, so we've saved our necks from the bowling ball effect. What's next on our posture checklist?
Let's move down to our wrists. Another area that takes a beating, especially for those of us who spend hours typing.
Oh, tell me about it. My wrists have definitely felt the strain of working from home. What's actually going on down there that causes so much trouble?
Well, it all comes down to repetitive strain. Every time you type, your tendons are gliding back and forth, creating friction.
Okay, but isn't a little friction normal?
Sure, but the problem is that when your wrists are bent, that friction increases, which can lead to tiny injuries called microtrauma.
Microtrauma.
No.
Sounds kind of scary.
It can be. These are tiny tears in the tendons, and over time they can add up to inflammation and even scar tissue buildup.
Oh no, that's not good.
Right. And that can lead to conditions like carpal tunnel syndrome, where the median nerve in your wrist gets compressed.
So those gel wrist rests that some people use aren't really the solution, are they?
Not really. They might feel comfortable at first, but they actually encourage you to rest your wrists while typing.
Which is the opposite of what we want.
Exactly. You want to keep your wrists straight, while floating above the keyboard.
Floating wrists.
Yeah.
Okay, I never heard it called that before. What does that actually look like?
Imagine your hands are hovering over the keyboard like a pianist ready to play. Your forearms should be parallel to the floor, and your wrists should be straight, not bent or resting on anything.
Got it. So it's all about minimizing that friction and keeping everything aligned.
Exactly. And if you find yourself typing like a T-Rex with your wrists bent and your fingers pointing downward,
I've definitely been there.
that's a sign that your keyboard is too high. You need to lower it so that you can maintain that neutral wrist position.
Okay, time to lower my keyboard and channel my inner concert pianist.
Exactly. It might feel a little awkward at first, but your wrists will thank you in the long run.
This is all making so much sense. I'm already starting to adjust my posture as we speak.
That's great. Small changes can make a big difference.
So we've covered our heads and our wrists. What about our backs? What can we do to support those?
Back pain is a huge issue, and it's often made worse by poor posture and the wrong kind of chair.
You're telling me I've definitely felt my back aching after a long day of working from home.
And it's not just a minor inconvenience. The American Chiropractic Association says that back pain is the third most common reason people visit the doctor.
Wow, that's a lot of back pain.
Yeah.
And with more people working from home these days, it's probably even worse now.
You're right. The UK Institute for Employment Studies found a 60% increase in back pain among UK employees since working from home became more common.
So clearly having the right kind of support is crucial. What can we do to help our backs?
Well, first and foremost, if you have an office chair, make sure the backrest reaches your shoulder blades.
Okay, so a chair with good back support is essential. What about those of us who are making do with dining chairs or even the couch?
I know not everyone has a fancy ergonomic setup, but you can still make some adjustments to improve your posture.
Like what?
Try to find a chair with a back that reaches at least to your shoulder blades and adjust the height so that your hips are slightly higher than your knees.
Makes sense. But even with a decent backrest, I'm guessing we still need to pay attention to our lower backs.
Right, absolutely. The lumbar spine, that's the lower part of your back, often gets neglected, leading to slouching and discomfort.
So what can we do to give our lumbar spine some love?
Well, if you have an office chair, it probably has built-in lumbar support.
Mine does.
But most home chairs don't. So a simple trick is to use a rolled-up towel.
A towel.
Yeah, just place it behind your lower back where the chair curves away. It'll help maintain the natural inward curve of your spine.
Wow, that's a great tip. I never would have thought of that.
It's an oldie but a goodie. Of course, a dedicated lumbar support cushion is even better, but in a pinch, a towel can really make a difference.
I love that simple solution. So we've covered the wrists and the back. What about our legs and feet? They're part of the posture equation too, right?
They absolutely are. The position of your legs and feet can actually affect your whole posture.
So how should our legs and feet be positioned for optimal posture?
Ideally, your feet should be flat on the floor with your knees slightly lower than your hips.
Okay, that sounds pretty straightforward. But what if your chair is too low or your legs are too short to comfortably reach the floor?
Good question. If your chair is adjustable, raise it until your hips are just slightly higher than your knees.
And if it's not adjustable?
You can use a pillow or a seat wedge to boost your height.
Gotcha. What about those of us with shorter legs who can't quite reach the floor, even with those adjustments? What should we do?
It's tempting to prop your feet up on anything you can find, but try to avoid propping them on wheels or chair legs.
Why not?
It might feel okay for a little while, but over time it can create awkward angles and actually lead to more discomfort.
So no makeshift footrests from random objects lying around the house.
Not ideal. A dedicated footrest is a better option. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Even a stack of books can work.
The goal is to have your feet comfortably supported so that your legs can relax.
Exactly. Remember, it's all about finding a comfortable and supportive position that you can maintain for longer periods of time.
This is all great advice. I'm definitely guilty of a few of those bad posture habits, but it sounds like even small changes can make a big difference.
They really can. It's not about being perfect all the time. It's about being mindful of your posture and making adjustments throughout the day.
Okay, so we've talked about positioning our heads, wrists, backs, legs, and feet, but all this talk of perfect posture makes it sound like we're supposed to be statues glued to our chairs all day.
Right. That's definitely not the goal.
Our bodies are meant to move.
Exactly. Even with the best posture in the world, sitting for hours on end isn't good for you.
So how do we break free from the posture prison and get our bodies moving?
The UK's Health and Safety Executive recommends taking short breaks every hour.
How short are we talking?
Even just 5 to 10 minutes of getting up and moving around can make a big difference.
Okay, I can definitely do that.
And you can even incorporate movement into your workday.
Like how?
Try standing up and stretching during phone calls or walking around while you brainstorm ideas.
I love that. What about those of us who spend hours staring at screens? Are there any tips for preventing eye strain?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah?
Have you heard of the 20-20-20 rule?
I don't think so. Tell me more.
It's simple. For every 20 minutes you spend looking at a screen, take 20 seconds to look at something 20 feet away.
Oh, wow. That's easy enough. I'm definitely going to start doing that.
It's a great way to give your eyes a break and prevent eye fatigue.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've learned about how to position our heads, wrists, backs, legs, and feet for better posture. And we even have some great tips for incorporating movement and eye breaks into our workday.
Exactly. We've really tackled the key elements of creating a healthier and more comfortable work-from-home experience.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I'm already sitting up straighter just from talking about it.
That's great. Remember, it's all about making small, consistent changes over time.
Okay. But before we get too carried away with our newfound posture perfection, I think it's important to remember that good posture isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing practice, right?
You're absolutely right. It's like developing healthy eating habits. You don't just eat one salad and call it a day.
It's about making consistent choices over time.
Exactly. So, how do we stay motivated and make good posture a habit?
That's a good question. I know it's easy to slip back into our old ways, especially when we're busy and focused on work.
It is, but one way to stay motivated is to really think about the consequences of neglecting our posture.
You mean like the aches and pains and potential health problems we talked about earlier?
Exactly. It's easy to brush those off thinking they'll just go away on their own.
But as we've learned today, those small discomforts can really snowball into much bigger issues down the road.
Right. Ignoring good posture is kind of like developing a beer belly.
Oh, okay, I'm listening.
Each unhealthy choice might not seem like a big deal in the moment, but over time they add up to a noticeable and often uncomfortable change.
Wow. Okay, that analogy definitely paints a vivid picture. So we need to treat good posture like a long-term investment in our health and well-being.
Exactly. It's about making those small, consistent choices that will pay off in the long run. It's like investing in a retirement fund for your body.
I love that. So far, this has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground and debunked quite a few myths along the way.
We have, and there's still so much more to explore.
Who knew a rolled-up towel could be such a posture game changer?
Right. And there's a whole world of research and insights into how posture impacts both our physical and mental health.
You're right. There's always more to learn and explore. Speaking of exploring, I know you mentioned some interesting research by a social psychologist named Amy Cuddy.
Oh, yes. Her work on power posing is fascinating.
Power posing, what's that all about?
She found that simply changing our posture can actually influence our hormone levels and make us feel more confident and powerful.
Seriously? Just by standing or sitting in a certain way, we can change our body chemistry.
It sounds crazy, but it's true. Our bodies and minds are so interconnected, and posture plays a surprisingly significant role in that connection.
That's amazing. I'm definitely going to have to check out her work.
I highly recommend it. Her TED Talk on power posing is a great place to start.
Perfect. We'll make sure to include a link to that in the show notes.
Great knowledge is power, especially when it comes to taking control of our own health and well-being.
Well said. So, we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. We've learned about how to sit properly, how to arrange our workspaces, and how to incorporate movement into our workday.
Yes, we've covered a lot of ground.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, do you have any final words of wisdom to inspire our listeners to embrace good posture and create healthier work-from-home habits?
My advice is to start small. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight.
Small changes add up.
Exactly. Just choose one thing we discussed today and make a conscious effort to implement it.
I love that. One small change can make a big difference over time.
Absolutely. So what about you? What's one thing you're challenging our listeners to do today?
I challenge everyone to take a moment and really assess their current workspace.
Good idea. Look around.
Are you sitting comfortably?
Is your equipment positioned in a way that supports good posture?
Think about one small change you can make today to create a healthier and more comfortable work-from-home experience.
It could be as simple as adjusting your monitor height or using a rolled-up towel for lumbar support.
Or setting a timer to remind yourself to take breaks.
That's a good one, too. Little reminders can go a long way.
Exactly. And remember, good posture is a journey, not a destination.
Be patient with yourself. Celebrate those small wins and keep learning.
Great advice. Now let's move on to another really interesting aspect of working from home.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, we often talk about good posture like it's just about our physical health.
Right. Like avoiding back pain and stuff.
Exactly. But there's a whole mental and emotional side to it too, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Our posture can actually influence how we feel about ourselves and how we interact with the world.
It's like that old saying, stand tall and feel confident. But is there any science behind that?
There is, actually. You know that researcher we talked about, Amy Cuddy?
The power posing lady?
Yes. Her research showed that holding certain postures, even for just a couple of minutes, can actually change your body chemistry.
No way. Really?
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Like if I stand with my hands on my hips or my arms raised in a V shape,
Exactly. Those are classic power poses.
I'm going to feel more confident.
You might. Those poses have been shown to increase testosterone, which is the hormone associated with dominance and confidence.
Yeah. And they decrease cortisol,
Right.
which is the stress hormone.
Exactly. So it's like a double whammy.
That's incredible. I'm definitely going to have to try that before my next big meeting.
I think you should. It's a simple but powerful way to boost your confidence.
Okay. So good posture isn't just about avoiding aches and pains. It's
Yeah.
about empowering ourselves from the inside out.
Exactly. It's about projecting confidence, feeling more assertive, and even improving our mood.
I love that. So we covered a lot of ground on the individual level, but what about the bigger picture? What are some of the trends and challenges facing companies now that so many people are working from home?
That's a great question. And it's something that a lot of the experts are talking about, especially Distribute Consulting and the Remote First Institute.
What are they saying?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is overcoming the myths and misconceptions that still surround remote work.
Oh, yeah. Like the idea that remote workers are less productive?
Exactly. Or that they're always slacking off in their pajamas.
Right. But the research actually shows the opposite, doesn't it?
It does. Distribute Consulting cites studies that show that remote workers can be even more productive than their in-office counterparts.
That makes sense. When you think about it, without all the distractions of a busy office,
Yeah.
it's easier to focus and get things done.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the quantity of work either. It's about the quality.
Mhm.
When you're working in an environment that suits you, you're more likely to do your best work.
Totally. But what about the social aspect of work? I know some people worry about feeling isolated when they work remotely.
That's a valid concern for sure. And it's something that companies need to be mindful of.
So it's not enough to just let people work from home and assume everything will be fine.
Right. It's about creating a deliberate remote work culture.
What does that look like?
Well, Distribute Consulting emphasizes the importance of clear communication channels, regular opportunities for virtual interaction, and a sense of community even when people are physically separated.
So it's about finding ways to connect and collaborate effectively using technology.
Exactly. We have so many amazing tools at our disposal these days. Video conferencing, instant messaging, virtual team building activities. It's really incredible.
The Remote First Institute also talked about the importance of having the right infrastructure and tools to support a remote work model.
Yes, things like reliable internet connections, secure access to company resources, and clear guidelines for communication and collaboration.
It's about setting remote workers up for success.
Absolutely. And that includes providing training on how to use those tools effectively.
So it's not just about giving people the tools, it's about making sure they know how to use them.
Exactly. It's about empowering people to be just as productive and engaged, even when they're not physically in the office.
This is all so fascinating. I'm curious about the long-term impact of this shift toward remote work. What do the experts predict for the future?
Well, Global Workplace Analytics, which has been studying workplace trends for over 2 decades, has some interesting insights.
What do they say?
They predict that remote work is here to stay and that it's going to continue to rise in popularity.
So this isn't just a passing trend. It's a fundamental shift in how we work.
They seem to think so, and they highlight a lot of potential benefits.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, they talk about significant cost savings for both companies and employees.
That makes sense. Companies can save on office space and all the associated costs.
Exactly, and employees can save on things like commuting work clothes and even childcare.
And Global Workplace Analytics also points out the positive environmental impact of remote work.
Right. Less commuting means fewer cars on the road, which means reduced carbon emissions.
So remote work is a more sustainable way of working.
It is. It's a win-win for both businesses and the planet.
But I imagine there are some challenges that come with this transition to remote work too. What are some things that companies need to be mindful of?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is making sure that everyone feels included and connected, regardless of where they're working.
That's a good point. It's so easy for remote workers to feel like they're out of the loop or that their contributions aren't valued.
It is. So companies need to be intentional about communication and making sure that everyone feels like they're part of the team.
And they also need to be mindful of different time zones and work styles.
Absolutely. Just because someone is working from home doesn't mean they're available 24/7.
Right. Setting boundaries and respecting people's time is crucial.
It is. It's about finding that balance between flexibility and accountability.
So overall, it sounds like the benefits of remote work outweigh the challenges,
Right.
especially when companies are proactive about addressing those challenges.
I think so too. It's an exciting time to be part of this evolution of how we work.
It really is. It
Yeah.
has the potential to create a more flexible, sustainable, and inclusive work world.
I agree. And it's forcing us to rethink some of our old assumptions about work and productivity.
It's amazing to think about all the possibilities. And I love how these sources we're looking at not only provide practical advice, but also encourage us to think about the bigger picture.
It's not just about where we work. It's about how work fits into our lives and how we can create a more fulfilling and balanced future.
Well said. Now, I'm curious to hear more about the role of companies in all of this. What are some specific things they can do to create a positive remote work culture and ensure that their employees thrive in this new environment?
That's a great question and one we need to address. So let's dive into that next.
Yeah. So how can companies create a work environment that really supports people, even when they're not physically in the office?
Well, Distribute Consulting talks a lot about the importance of having a clear remote work policy.
A remote work policy.
Yeah, basically, it's a set of guidelines and expectations for remote work.
Okay. So it's not enough to just say, hey, everyone work from home now.
Right. You need to have some structure in place.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So what kind of things should this policy cover?
It should outline things like communication protocols, data security, expectations around availability and work hours, things like that.
So it's like a roadmap for remote work,
Yeah.
making sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. It helps to avoid confusion and misunderstandings.
Okay. So that's the policy side of things.
Hmm.
What about the more practical aspects, like technology and resources?
Right. That's another crucial area. Companies need to make sure that remote workers have the tools they need to do their jobs effectively.
So things like good video conferencing, software collaboration platforms, secure access to company data.
Exactly. And it's not just about providing the tools, it's also about providing training and support.
To make sure people know how to use them.
Exactly. Especially for people who are new to working remotely, it can be a steep learning curve.
Definitely. So companies need to invest in both the technology and the training.
Absolutely. And they also need to recognize that managing remote teams might require a different leadership style.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, remote leaders need to be really good at communication, delegation, building trust from a distance. It's a different skill set.
So it's not just about trying to replicate the in-office experience virtually.
Right. It's about adapting to a new way of working.
And recognizing that remote work isn't one size fits all.
Exactly. Some people thrive in a fully remote setting, while others might prefer a hybrid model.
It's about being flexible and accommodating to the different needs of the workforce.
Absolutely. Another really cool thing about remote work is that it has the potential to really enhance diversity and inclusion within companies.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, by removing geographical barriers, companies can tap into a much wider talent pool.
That makes sense.
They can hire people from all over the world, including people who might not be able to relocate or who have caregiving responsibilities that make traditional work arrangements difficult.
So remote work can open up opportunities for people who might have been excluded in the past.
Exactly. It's about creating a more equitable and inclusive workplace.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there are a lot of potential benefits to embracing remote work, both for individuals and for companies.
I think so too. There are definitely challenges to navigate, but I'm really optimistic about the future of work.
Me too. It's exciting to think about all the possibilities.
It is, and it's important to remember that this is still a relatively new way of working. We're all still figuring it out.
That's true.
Right.
But it's great to see so many companies and individuals embracing the change and really thinking about how we can create a better future of work.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that we need to keep having.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. We've covered so much ground, from the nitty-gritty details of good posture to the broader trends shaping the future of work.
It's been a really interesting conversation.
It has. So, what are your final thoughts for our listeners as they navigate this new world of work?
I would say embrace the flexibility that remote work offers, but be intentional about creating a workspace and a routine that supports your well-being.
Great advice. It's all about finding that balance.
It is, and don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best for you. What works for one person might not work for another.
That's so true. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to remote work.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. There are so many resources and communities out there to support you.
That's a great point. There's a whole world of remote workers out there sharing tips and advice and supporting each other.
It's really inspiring to see.
It is. So, as we wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy talking about this stuff.
And a big thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in.
We hope you found this deep dive helpful and informative.
And that you learned a thing or two about good posture and the future of work.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive wherever you get your podcasts.
And leave us a review. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep learning.
Thanks for listening.